My name is Morgan Walker. At 32, I believed I understood everything about my family. But that illusion shattered one evening over dinner. My grandmother Elaine had always been my anchor, especially during the stormy months when my graphic design firm was barely staying afloat. For years, our monthly dinners at my parents' home were a non-negotiable tradition. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the carefully curated normalcy, until one question detonated a minefield buried beneath our smiles. Before I walk you into that night, the night everything changed, let me know where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy stories where family facades crumble and buried truths claw their way to the surface. From the time I was small, it was clear Grandma Elaine wasn't just comfortable, she was loaded. Her wealth came from a real estate empire my late grandfather had built, which she continued to manage with the kind of precision CEOs envy. Meanwhile, my parents, Catherine and Thomas, lived a typical suburban life. Our family home was modest, tidy, and filled with the sort of middle-class restraint you find in people who know every dollar's job. But Grandma? She lived in an ivy-covered mansion tucked away behind wrought iron gates. Landscaped gardens, staff that had served her for decades, and the kind of quiet luxury that didn't need to announce itself. Even as a child, I could sense something was off. Mom wore her best fake smile around Grandma, tight and brittle. Dad became unusually quiet, eyes down, spine straighter than usual. I thought adults were just weird that way. But as I matured, I began picking up on the tension, especially from my mother. Your grandmother thinks her money makes her queen of the world, she'd mutter after visits. She's lorded it over us since day one. Despite her resentment, my bond with Grandma only deepened. She introduced me to watercolors when I was 7, gifted me a DSLR at 13 when I showed interest in photography, and cheered the loudest when I declared I was going to pursue graphic design instead of business. Live for what sets your soul on fire, she whispered after one of my parents' lectures about practical degrees. My siblings didn't share the same closeness. Ryan, my older brother, kept his distance. He dove headfirst into finance, carving his own identity, seemingly uninterested in Grandma's support. My younger sister Caitlin mirrored our mother's cool detachment, polite, but always stiff and distant. After college, I slowly built a client base. The business wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I paid rent, knocked down student loans, and even had a small cushion saved, until the pandemic pulled the rug out from under me. My largest client, a luxury hotel group, canceled all contracts. Just like that, 60% of my income vanished. I didn't tell anyone. Mom and Dad never missed a chance to question my career path, and I wasn't ready to hand them an "I told you so" moment. Ryan was reeling from a divorce, Caitlin was still drowning in grad school deadlines, and I wasn't about to ask them for help. The only person I turned to was Grandma. One afternoon, I visited her, more for emotional support than anything else. But Grandma never half measured her loyalty. "You're not alone in this, sweetheart," she said, placing a check in my hand. "Family lifts each other up." I resisted at first, but she was firm. It felt like a loan, something temporary. I had no idea what that gesture would eventually expose. In the months that followed, strange things began to happen. Anytime Grandma called, my mom would suddenly get busy, and my dad's attention would magically be consumed by whatever game or show was on. I chalked it up to the usual discomfort they had around her, but I should have looked closer. Then came the dinner. It was a crisp autumn evening, and I pulled into my parents' driveway behind my dad's shiny new SUV. A curious upgrade from his sensible sedan. 0% financing, he'd explained months ago when I asked. Figured it was time. Even the house had changed. The once muted exterior now had fresh landscaping, and when I stepped inside, the upgrades were glaring. New marble counters gleamed in the kitchen. Brushed gold fixtures sparkled. The living room looked like a high-end catalog spread. "Do you like it?" Mom asked, beaming like a tour guide. We decided it was time for a little upgrade. "It looks incredible," I said, genuinely surprised. My parents had always been frugal. Coupon clippers. Budget vacationers. I couldn't figure out how they suddenly had cash for high-end renovations. "Business must be booming," I joked. Dad laughed, a little too quickly. "We're getting by. Want a glass of wine?" As he poured, I scanned the room, feeling like a guest inside the home I'd grown up in. Something didn't add up, and within the next hour, one question, just one, would detonate everything they'd tried so hard to hide. The sudden show of luxury didn't sit right with me. My parents had always been frugal, strategic with spending, proud of their cautious budgeting. But this? Designer chandeliers, high-end appliances, and a bottle of vintage Bordeaux opened on a random Saturday night? Something didn't track. Ryan arrived next, stepping through the door with the weary look of someone already done with the evening. He made a beeline for the liquor cabinet and poured himself a generous glass of scotch, the kind reserved for holidays. His drinking had escalated since his divorce, but tonight, it felt different. There was an edge to it, a deliberate effort to dull whatever was brewing beneath the surface. Rough day? I asked lightly, trying to sound casual. Something like that, he mumbled, eyes fixed on the amber liquid. Is Grandma here yet? Caitlin breezed in moments later, barely lifting her head. Her thumbs were a blur across her phone screen, jaw clenched like she was handling a crisis. You okay? I asked, catching her elbow. Fine. Just school, she said quickly, brushing past me. Except school was on break. Her behavior didn't match her words. She was jittery, distracted, like someone expecting a storm. The air inside the house was thick with nervous energy. Mom kept darting into the kitchen, fiddling with the oven that didn't beep. Dad straightened silverware that was already perfectly aligned. Ryan poured another drink. Caitlin couldn't stop tapping her screen. Something was definitely off. And no one was saying a word. Right on cue, the doorbell rang at exactly 6. Grandma Elaine was never late. Dad jumped up to answer, while Mom barked last-minute instructions under her breath. Everyone smile. Be nice. No comments about the kitchen. The door opened, and in stepped Grandma, regal as ever. Her navy dress was sleek and tailored, her signature pearl necklace gleaming under the entryway light. At 78, she moved with the poise of someone half her age, back straight, heels clicking confidently, her white hair styled into its usual immaculate wave. Catherine, she said with a polite nod to my mother. Thomas, she greeted my dad, her tone a shade warmer, then her face softened, truly lighting up when her gaze met mine. Morgan, darling. She embraced me tightly, the scent of Chanel No. 5 wrapping around me like nostalgia. For a brief second, I was 7 again, sitting on her lap with a sketchpad and markers. I noticed my mother's shoulders tense at the affection exchanged between us. She didn't say a word, but the tightness around her eyes said everything. Ryan, you've lost weight, Grandma said, touching his cheek. Are you eating enough? Ryan offered a half smile, now clutching his third scotch. Work keeps me busy. And Caitlin, Mom hissed as she caught her still texting, put the phone away. Caitlin shoved it into her jacket pocket, flashing a forced grin. Sorry, Grandma. Big project due soon. Elaine's perfectly sculpted brow lifted slightly. She didn't call her out, but it was clear she knew Caitlin wasn't telling the truth. Nothing escaped her notice. Mom ushered us toward the dining room, where she had gone all out. The table was magazine-worthy. Prime rib, mashed potatoes laced with truffle oil, perfectly arranged asparagus, and golden rolls warm from the oven. Crystal goblets shimmered under the light fixture. The good china, the kind usually hidden behind glass except for Thanksgiving, was in full use. You've really outdone yourself, Catherine, Grandma commented, eyeing the wine, the floral arrangement, the gold-plated flatware. Just wanted tonight to be special, Mom replied, lips stretched thin. Family is everything. We found our places. Dad sat at one end, Grandma at the other, a visual reminder of who really held the reins in this family. The table fell into a rhythm of scraping silverware and uncomfortable small talk. Mom's hands trembled as she passed the rolls, dropping one onto the tablecloth. Sorry, she blurted, recovering it quickly. The place looks different, Grandma observed, slicing into her meal with precision. New furniture? Just a few changes, Mom answered quickly. Small updates. And Thomas. She added smoothly, that SUV out front is yours, isn't it? Dad fumbled his wineglass. End of year deal. Couldn't pass it up. Grandma didn't challenge him. She just nodded once and moved on. Ryan, how's work? Made partner yet? He stared into his fourth drink. Almost there. Just need to close a few more deals. And Caitlin? Grandma asked. The economics program keeping you busy? Caitlin nodded too enthusiastically. So much work. Nonstop. I watched as Grandma registered every lie, every twitch. She hadn't said a word out of place. But her eyes missed nothing, and I realized. Right then, we were all sitting on a ticking time bomb. Absolutely, Caitlin answered, sitting up straighter. Top of my class. I watched this odd little performance unfold with growing suspicion. Everyone was putting on a show, but for whose benefit? And why did it feel like my parents were walking on eggshells in their own home? The conversation veered into safer waters, local traffic issues, upcoming charity events, and idle small talk about an early frost. Still, the atmosphere stayed taut, like a violin string stretched too tightly. My mother kept sneaking glances at my father, whose collar seemed too tight despite the mild room temperature. Beads of sweat glistened on his forehead, and his hand shook ever so slightly as he refilled his wine. Then Grandma turned toward me, her tone shifting. Morgan, dear, how's business going? Have you found any new clients since that hospitality group backed out? I opened my mouth to respond, but Mom spoke over me. Morgan's doing just fine, Elaine. Let's not bring up work at the dinner table. Grandma's smile thinned. I was speaking to Morgan, Catherine. I cleared my throat, heart pounding slightly. It's been rough, I said honestly. But I'm gradually rebuilding. A few new contracts came in this month. Hoping to hit a stable point again by next quarter. That's the determination I admire, Grandma replied, her voice softening. Grit runs in the Walker line, well, some of us, at least. Mom's fingers clenched around her fork, and the temperature in the room seemed to dip. Dad started rearranging his mashed potatoes like he was excavating a mine. I chewed slowly, watching as Grandma launched into what felt like a targeted interrogation. She asked about the renovations. Catherine, how much did that kitchen upgrade cost? She asked casually. Mom laughed nervously. Oh, just a small refresh. Nothing outrageous. And Ryan, your firm's listed in the journal's top 10 performers. They mentioned a major client acquisition. Was that you? Ryan coughed into his drink. One of the team efforts, he said vaguely, his words a little slurred now. Then she turned to Caitlin. What's tuition like these days for a graduate program in economics? It's gone up, I imagine. Caitlin nodded a little too quickly. Yeah, it's substantial. Each question felt like a needle, sharp, precise, drawing reactions that made it clear something was being concealed. Mom kept trying to pivot to benign topics, neighbors renovating, the garden blooming late this year, but Grandma wasn't biting. Dad offered a few one-word responses and left the rest to my mother, who grew visibly more strained with every passing moment. Ryan had started sipping scotch like water, and Caitlin hid her phone beneath the table, sneakily checking messages while trying not to make it obvious. I just sat quietly, trying to read between the lines. Every family has secrets, but tonight felt like I was witnessing the walls around those secrets begin to crumble. Mom wheeled out dessert with a tremble in her hands. A tiramisu unlike anything she'd ever made before, elegant, decadent, topped with chocolate curls and gold flakes. It was a dish that screamed effort. Overcompensation. A last-ditch attempt to impress or distract. Grandma laid down her napkin, took a slow sip of coffee, and then turned to me. The hum of conversation faded. Morgan, she said, her tone light, her eyes sharp. I've been meaning to ask, are the $2,000 transfers I've been sending enough? If you need more while rebuilding, you just have to let me know. The spoon froze halfway to my lips. I blinked. Surely I'd misheard. What transfers? I asked. The room fell into stunned silence. Forks stopped moving. Glasses remained untouched. Heads turned. All eyes landed on my parents. My mother's complexion turned ghostly, lips parting without words. My father avoided my gaze, suddenly captivated by the swirls in his dessert. I repeated, louder this time, what transfers, Grandma? Elaine didn't even look at me. Her gaze was locked on my mother, her face stone. Catherine, she said slowly, would you care to explain why Morgan seems unaware of the monthly support I've been providing since she told me about her financial challenges? My mother let out a laugh so forced, it bordered on hysterical. Oh, there's clearly a misunderstanding. Is there? Grandma's tone sharpened. Because I have the banking records. For 5 years, I've been sending funds, $2,000 a month, into an account you assured me was Morgan's emergency reserve. You claimed she'd been diagnosed with a serious illness. Something chronic. Something requiring long-term care. My jaw dropped. Illness? I'm perfectly healthy. Dad finally spoke, his voice gravelly and low. Elaine, we can explain. I hope so, Grandma snapped. Because from my perspective, it appears you two have been siphoning money intended for Morgan and using it for yourselves. Ryan gave a low whistle and reached for the bottle again. Caitlin stopped moving entirely, phone forgotten in her lap. What the hell was going on, Mom? Dad? My voice came out quieter than I expected, but laced with a mix of disbelief and desperation. I looked at them, hoping, pleading, for some kind of logical explanation. Anything that might make sense of what I had just heard. What is she talking about? I asked, turning toward Grandma, then back to the two people who were supposed to protect me. My mother's expression twisted. First with guilt, then with something darker. Bitterness. You've always been her golden child, she snapped, her words sharp and bitter. Always getting her approval, her money, her affection. Why shouldn't we benefit from that too? It hit like a punch. You've been taking the money she sent for me? My voice trembled. For 5 years? At least my father had the shame to look down. It wasn't theft, he muttered. We're your parents. We've supported you since birth. Grandma's voice cut in, crisp and unforgiving. Catherine, she said slowly, each syllable deliberate, how much have you taken from those transfers? My mother squared her shoulders, defiant. We earned it. We raised 3 kids. You have no idea what that costs. That wasn't the question, Grandma replied, eyes narrowed. How much? Dad exhaled, his defeat plain. Roughly 120,000. I felt the air leave my lungs. My thoughts spun. That amount could have cleared my entire student debt. It could have kept my business afloat during the worst months of the shutdown. I had been rationing food, skipping health insurance premiums, worrying about eviction, all while they remodeled their kitchen and bought new cars. And what about last year? Grandma pressed. When Morgan told me she was barely holding things together. Mom faltered, her mouth opening but no sound emerging. There was a flicker of panic in her eyes. Then she straightened and gave a practiced shrug. We were planning to tell her. Eventually. Tell me what? I demanded. What else did you take? Grandma turned to me, face drawn in fury and sadness. When you confided in me about your finances, I increased the monthly deposit to $5,000 to help stabilize your business. I was told the additional funds were being directed into your account. I blinked. You sent $5,000? Monthly? She nodded. For a full year. 60,000 total. Another wave of betrayal rolled through me. My mind conjured images of the past year, paying bills with credit cards, skipping dentist visits, crying alone in my apartment because I couldn't afford groceries. All the while, they were renovating their home with money meant to support me. How could you do this? I whispered, my voice cracking. I'm your daughter. My mother's tone turned defensive. You have no idea the pressure we've been under. Your father's company has been laying people off. My district hasn't offered a raise in years. We had appearances to maintain. Appearances? I said, stunned. You drained money meant to help me survive so you could impress your neighbors? We didn't steal, she snapped. We kept the money in the family. It's not theft, it's redistribution. No, Grandma said firmly. That was earmarked. It had one purpose, help Morgan. It wasn't yours to spend. The silence in the room grew louder than any shouting match. I stared down at the untouched tiramisu, my appetite gone. The sense of betrayal was suffocating. They had watched me drown while they vacationed in the shallow end of luxury. Did you ever intend to tell me? I asked again, neither answered. Their silence was damning. I can't believe this, I muttered, pushing the plate away. 5 years. 5 entire years. Mom sat straighter, clinging to her warped justification. We gave you everything. A home. Clothes. An education. Actually, Grandma interrupted, her voice hardening, I paid for her degree. My eyes widened. You did? Of course, she said. I established education trusts for all 3 of you when you were born. I turned to my parents, shocked. What is she talking about? Grandma looked at them, the expression on her face a mix of disappointment and wrath. Let me guess, she said coldly. You never told her about the trust either, did you? My mother flushed. We didn't want them growing up entitled. What your mother means, Grandma said, speaking directly to me, is that I created a fund for each grandchild. It was meant to cover all higher education costs. Your parents managed yours until your 25th birthday. At that point, it should have been turned over to you. I sat frozen. So, my student loans shouldn't exist? Grandma nodded. That money could have covered every penny. But it was never passed to you. I looked at my parents, unable to speak. The trust was real. The money had been there. They had simply chosen not to tell me, and in that moment, a quiet fury settled over me, cold, sharp, and unforgettable. Throughout college, I juggled 2 part-time jobs just to stay afloat. I skipped meals, survived on instant noodles, and shared a cramped apartment with 4 other students. All the while, a trust fund created specifically for my education sat untouched, drained behind my back. I finally found my voice, raw with disbelief. Where did the money go? Dad stared at the floor. We made some investments that didn't go as planned. You gambled away my future, I said, each syllable heavier than the last. The pain in my chest made it hard to breathe. It wasn't gambling, Mom snapped, her voice rising in irritation. It was a strategic venture. It just didn't work out. Grandma interjected, her tone like a sharpened blade. And rather than admit your mistake or ask for guidance, you let Morgan accumulate debt that never should have existed. From the far end of the table, Ryan let out a bitter laugh, slightly slurred. Of course. That tracks. Tell me you didn't pull the same stunt with my fund. The brief glance exchanged between our parents answered the question before a word was spoken. You've got to be joking, Ryan muttered, slamming his tumbler onto the table. The amber liquid splashed over the edge. I've been slaving away at a job I despise, just to repay loans that didn't need to exist. And you've been sitting on the very fund that was meant to pay for it all? Dad started. Ryan, you have to understand. Oh, I understand now, Ryan interrupted sharply. You pushed me into finance so I could rescue you both from your own recklessness. You needed someone to bail you out. Admit it. Across the table, Caitlin's complexion had gone pale. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for her water. "What about mine?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Is that why you keep telling me I should drop my grad program? Because it's too expensive?" Mom and Dad exchanged another look, another silent confirmation. "Oh my God," Caitlin whispered, her hand covering her mouth. "It's gone. Mine's gone too, isn't it?" "We were going to replenish it," Dad said, trying to salvage something, anything. "We had a timeline. A plan." "A plan?" I echoed, stunned. "Your grand strategy was to keep funneling Grandma's money into your personal expenses and hope no one ever noticed?" "We didn't steal," Mom insisted, slamming her palm down so hard that the stemware vibrated. "Everything we did was for this family. To preserve our reputation. To maintain stability." I shook my head, rage bubbling under my skin. "You siphoned off my education fund, pocketed my monthly support, and watched me scrape by. You let me suffer to renovate your kitchen." Mom's composure finally shattered. Her face contorted as tears poured freely, not from remorse, but from the humiliation of exposure. "You can't possibly understand what it's like," she cried. "To live in Elaine's shadow. To never measure up. Nothing we did was ever enough. We were never polished enough, never wealthy enough, never respected enough. So you decided to lie and steal from your children?" Grandma said, her voice a flat wall of judgment. "This is the example you set?" Dad shrank into his chair. "We always intended to fix it," he said weakly. "We thought we had time before anyone realized." Ryan scoffed. "And what magical investment was going to earn you back 6 figures?" Mom turned to him, mascara running. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. We needed more time. Just like you needed more time to tell me I had a trust fund?" I snapped. Grandma folded her arms. "You gambled your children's futures. For the sake of granite countertops and imported chandeliers. It's easy for you to judge," Mom spat. "You've never faced financial insecurity. You've always had options." Grandma's laugh came low and sharp, like a match strike in a dark room. "You think I've never known hardship? You truly believe I sat around sipping champagne while money fell into my lap?" Mom didn't answer. "I built our real estate empire beside your father-in-law," Grandma continued, eyes blazing. "I managed tenants, filed taxes, handled late-night maintenance calls, negotiated contracts, balanced books, and raised a child while doing it. I didn't inherit wealth. I worked every inch of it into existence." The table fell into stunned silence. For as long as I could remember, Mom had painted Grandma as some idle society wife, privileged, disconnected, unrelatable. But the truth was vastly different. She hadn't married into power. She had earned it. And she had tried to share it with us, only to be betrayed. By her own daughter, learning that Grandma had helped build the family fortune with her own hands shattered the narrative I'd grown up believing. She had been painted as a detached, pampered matriarch, but that image crumbled completely. "I believe," Grandma said, folding her napkin with slow precision and laying it beside her untouched tiramisu, "that this dinner has come to an end. And so has any further financial support for you, Catherine. You as well, Thomas." Mom's tear-streaked face twisted with panic. "Elaine, no. You can't be serious." "I'm very serious," Grandma said, cutting her off mid-sentence. "You've violated not just my trust, but your own children's futures. From this moment forward, any support I give will go directly to my grandchildren. No more middlemen. No more secrecy." "We'll lose everything," Dad whispered, the gravity of their situation finally registering. "Perhaps you should have considered that before misusing money that never belonged to you," Grandma replied with cold finality. Then she turned to me. Her voice softened, her stern mask cracking just enough to reveal sorrow. "Morgan, I should have verified everything myself. I take full responsibility for not doing so. You trusted your parents, and I trusted them too. I couldn't find the strength to respond. The weight of the betrayal suffocated me. These were the people who had watched me scrape by, constantly stressed and financially exhausted, while they secretly funneled money meant for me into their luxury lifestyle. They let me struggle under the illusion that I had no support, when in reality, they had been living off my security net." I pushed back my chair, grabbed my purse, and without saying a word, walked out of the house. Behind me, I heard Mom calling my name, her voice shrill with desperation, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Not after everything. As I slid into my car, I glanced through the front window one last time. The scene inside looked like a stage set for a family unraveling, Mom weeping dramatically, Dad slumped with his head in his hands, Ryan refilling his glass, Caitlin furiously texting, and Grandma sitting perfectly still, her expression a blend of quiet rage and profound disappointment. At that moment, I knew things would never return to what they were for the next 3 days. I didn't pick up a single call. My phone lit up nonstop, mostly from my parents. Their messages evolved from defensive, "You don't understand the full picture," to desperate, "Please, just talk to us," to outright manipulative, "After everything we've done, don't you think you owe us a conversation?" I couldn't bring myself to respond to any of it. On the fourth day, Grandma left a voicemail. Just one, "Morgan, sweetheart. I'm here whenever you're ready. No pressure, no expectations. I love you." That simple message broke me. No guilt. No demands. Just love. I called her back that evening. "Can I come over?" I asked, my voice small. "Of course, darling. I'll have Mardia bake those lemon cookies you used to love." Grandma's home felt like a warm shelter from the emotional wreckage I'd walked away from. As soon as I entered, the familiar aroma of lemon and vanilla hugged me like an old memory. Mardia, her loyal housekeeper of over 30 years, greeted me with a smile and ushered me into the sunroom. A pot of tea waited, already poured. Grandma sat beside it, ready. "I've been doing some digging," she said gently, skipping small talk like she always did when something serious needed addressing. "And I'm afraid what we discovered at dinner wasn't even half the story." She slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were documents, bank records, trust statements, wire transfers, spreadsheets, spanning nearly a decade. "What is all this?" "Proof," she said. "Your parents didn't just divert your monthly allowance. They misused funds earmarked for all three of you, starting when you were still in high school." As I flipped through the pages, each record punched harder than the last. Not only had they drained the education trusts and redirected my financial support, but they'd also carried out similar schemes involving Ryan and Caitlin. They told me Ryan needed help with a down payment, Grandma explained, her voice weary. "So I sent him $50,000. That money never reached him." My eyes widened. "And Caitlin?" "They claimed she'd been in a serious car accident 3 years ago and needed help with medical bills. I wired them $20,000. But after checking, there's no record of any accident. Not even a fender bender." I clenched the folder tighter. My hands were shaking. Did Ryan or Caitlin have any clue? "I've spoken to both," Grandma said. "Ryan started getting suspicious when your parents bought that Florida timeshare. The same month his mortgage application was denied. As for Caitlin, she had no idea. She's been completely in the dark." The bile rose in my throat. "How much total?" Her face hardened. "Close to 400,000. I stared at her, stunned. $400,000. My parents, who always preached sacrifice, budgeting, responsibility, had been quietly bleeding the family dry to finance their image. "There's more," Grandma said, leaning forward. I braced myself. "Your student loans? They were paid off 3 years ago." I blinked. "No, they weren't. I make monthly payments. I see the deductions." "To an account your parents created," she replied grimly, pointing to a line item. "But the actual loans? They were fully cleared, paid in full from your trust. The payment confirmation is right here." My mind reeled. For years, I had been handing over hundreds each month, thinking I was chipping away at debt, when in fact, that debt didn't even exist anymore. The money was going straight to them. They hadn't just stolen from me. They'd manipulated my sense of struggle, fabricated my financial hardship, profited from my suffering. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a long con, engineered by the people who were supposed to protect me. It was one of the only legitimate things they had done with the trust. Every payment I'd been sending, month after month, hadn't gone toward my student debt. It had been deposited straight into my parents' account. For 3 entire years, I'd scraped together $500 every month, cutting back on everything from groceries to social plans, believing I was slowly digging myself out of debt. $18,000. That's what I'd unknowingly funneled into the hands of the very people who had caused this mess. Why? My voice cracked under the weight of betrayal. Why would they do this to their own children? Grandma sighed deeply, folding her hands as if trying to brace herself. "Your mother's been chasing an image for decades. A lifestyle she can't afford. And your father, well, he avoids conflict at all costs. She leads, he follows. Together, they've been juggling credit cards, second mortgages, and whatever cash they could siphon from me, without ever admitting the truth." She paused before adding, "Even the home you grew up in? I gave them the money for the down payment. They claimed it was their savings. That shattered the last illusion I had. The modest upbringing I thought was built on hard work and budgeting had been a glossy fiction, funded by deception." The following afternoon, Ryan called. His usual confident tone was gone, replaced with something heavier. "Did Grandma walk you through everything?" "I think so," I said. "Still feels like some bizarre dream." "I confronted Dad yesterday," he admitted. He broke down. "It's worse than even Grandma realizes. They've taken out a second mortgage. Every credit card they own is maxed. They're drowning in personal loans. I swallowed hard. So, they've been robbing Peter to pay Paul. Exactly, he muttered. I honestly think Mom has a spending addiction. And Dad just enables her. He's too scared to say no. Later that night, Caitlin knocked on my apartment door. Her eyes were swollen and red, makeup smudged. She clutched a steaming mug of tea and curled up on my couch like a child. I caught Mom in a lie 3 years ago, she confessed, voice trembling. Remember when she said Grandma's birthday gift for me got lost in the mail? I nodded, vaguely recalling the excuse. Well, I called Grandma to thank her anyway. She was confused. Said she hadn't sent anything. What happened when? You asked Mom about it? She panicked. Begged me not to tell anyone. Said if I made a big deal out of it, I'd tear the family apart. I believed her. I was such an idiot. You weren't an idiot, I said softly. You trusted her. We all did. The more we shared, the clearer the picture became. The warning signs had been there all along: lavish purchases that didn't match their salaries, countless excuses, and relentless pressure on all of us to chase financial success while they sabotaged ours from behind the curtain. A week after that dinner, I finally agreed to meet my parents face to face. I needed closure. I needed to see their expressions, to hear whatever explanations they could possibly offer. When I arrived, the change in them was jarring. Mom looked frail, her blouse hanging off her thin frame. Dad's face had aged a decade, sunken cheeks. Worry lines etched deep around his mouth. Morgan, Mom said, stepping toward me with arms outstretched. I stepped back. Thank you for coming, she whispered. We've been so worried. Worried about me? I asked coldly, or about the collapse of your financial fantasy? They led me into the living room, where the costly furniture sat, furniture purchased using money meant for my future. The irony was as thick as the silence that followed. We know we've made terrible choices, Dad started, his voice shaky. We never imagined it would spiral like this. I stared at them. Did you think it would fix itself? That it would. All somehow disappear? Mom didn't try to deny it. It started with small things. One decision led to another. Eventually, it was too late to back out. So you kept digging, I said, and dragged your kids down with you. Dad gave a defeated nod. My retirement took a hit during the market dip. Then your mother wanted to redo the kitchen. Then the car broke down. It was always one more thing. And you thought you'd pay it back with what, exactly? I asked. Your income hasn't increased. Did you think the money would magically appear? Their silence answered everything. Where did it all go? I asked, motioning around at the beautiful but hollow surroundings. The walls felt like props now, part of an elaborate stage. Mom collapsed into tears. We're losing everything anyway. The bank called. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. The cards are maxed. Your dad can't get approved for another loan. You've been living like millionaires with no money, I muttered. For years. Dad nodded, rubbing his temples. We kept waiting for a break, an inheritance, a promotion, anything. But it never came. So your plan was to gamble with your children's lives while you waited for a miracle? Mom sobbed harder, the tears not of guilt, but despair. Your grandmother cutting us off, it's the final blow. Everything's crashing down. We're going to lose the house, she whispered, her voice hollow. I stood there in silence, realizing the truth. Their entire reality had been built on borrowed time and stolen trust. And now, the bill had finally come due, all of it, gone. Dad's voice trembled as he surveyed the wreckage of their choices. I should have felt something: pity, sadness, even regret. These were the people who once tied my shoelaces, who held my hand during storms, who cheered from the sidelines. But standing in their living room now, all I could see were 2 people who had consciously sacrificed their children's futures for personal convenience. You didn't earn any of it, I said flatly, rising to my feet. You didn't build anything. You stole, from your own family. From Grandma. From me. From Ryan. From Caitlin. Dad reached out, voice breaking. Morgan, we're still your parents. We love you. I stepped back. No. Love doesn't siphon money meant for tuition. Love doesn't let someone suffer through sleepless nights over overdue bills while sitting on stolen support. Love doesn't construct a decade-long lie. As I headed toward the exit, Mom's voice cracked behind me. So you're just walking away? When we need you most? I turned around, stunned by the audacity. You let me survive on canned soup and minimum wage shifts. You heard me cry on the phone about rent. And now, after all that, you want sympathy? Silence fell like a guillotine. When I'm ready, I'll reach out, I said finally. Until then, don't message me, don't call, and do not show up at my door. I closed the door behind me, cutting off Mom's sobs and Dad's muffled words. The driveway felt longer than usual, like I was crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. But this time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt something closer to liberation. Perhaps I had always been alone. Now, I just knew it. The following weeks were a haze of conflicting emotions: rage, sorrow, disbelief, and eventually, a strange calm. I buried myself in work, pushing harder than I had in years. Without debt. Looming overhead, a creative spark returned. New clients. Larger projects. Bigger ambitions. Grandma kept her promise. A day after our tea, she initiated a direct deposit, this time, solely under my name. Alongside that came a lump sum, meant to restore everything they'd quietly drained from me. "This isn't generosity," she'd said firmly when I hesitated. "This is justice. Use it wisely, Morgan. Build your future." With that cushion, I upgraded to a better apartment, replaced outdated equipment, and finally hired a part-time assistant. For the first time in my life, I didn't flinch every time I opened my bank app. Ryan and I became close in a way we hadn't been since childhood. Our wounds had created a shared understanding. He'd left the job he hated, one he'd taken, only to meet our father's expectations, and launched his own business consulting firm. 10 years down the drain, he confessed one evening over takeout. All to win approval that never really mattered. Caitlin struggled the most. She'd been the most shielded, the most trusting. Learning that the grad school program she was nearly guilted into quitting had been fully funded all along crushed her. "I almost dropped out," she told me through tears. "All those nights questioning myself. And it was never even about the tuition. They just didn't want to spend what was already mine." But with Grandma's steady hand, she stayed. Enrolled, and thrived. Our little trio began meeting regularly, forming our own circle of strength. No drama, no deception, just honesty and support. Meanwhile, our parents' world crumbled. 2 months after the dinner that fractured everything, they listed the house. Foreclosure was imminent. The luxury vehicles were repossessed. The vacation property vanished. Collection agencies became their daily soundtrack. I never saw any of it personally. I couldn't. Ryan kept me informed in brief, detached updates. I still wasn't ready. Their choices had left scars, and I wasn't finished healing. The wounds were still fresh, and forgiveness wasn't part of my vocabulary. Not yet. 3 months after that fateful dinner, an envelope appeared in my mailbox, hand-addressed, sealed in an envelope that reeked of expensive perfume and desperation. It was from my mother. Not a message or an email. A handwritten letter. On thick ivory cardstock, likely purchased during one of her indulgent shopping sprees from the years of illusion. "Morgan," it began in looping script. "We know we've hurt you deeply. No apology can undo the pain, but we're hoping you'll allow us a chance to fully explain ourselves." Pages followed. Paragraph after paragraph painted a portrait of pressure, debt, and the slow descent from one minor lie into an entire alternate reality. They described the weight of appearances, how expectations crushed their better judgment, and how everything spiraled out of control. It was part confession, part rationalization, yet nowhere did it fully own the cost of their actions. No real recognition of the emotional toll. No genuine acknowledgement of how deeply they had sabotaged my autonomy, shattered my trust, and stripped me of confidence when I needed it most. At its core, it was still about them. Their fears. Their rationale. Their needs. I never responded. A week later, during our now ritual Sunday brunch, Grandma glanced over her teacup with quiet concern. "You received Catherine's letter," she said. It wasn't a question. I gave a small nod. "It was disappointing. They still can't accept full responsibility," she said calmly, stirring her tea. "Catherine always struggled with accountability. And Thomas, well, silence has always been his shield." I hesitated. Then asked, "Did you ever suspect anything? All these years?" She exhaled slowly. "There were signs. Inconsistencies. But I didn't want to believe they'd betray their own children. Perhaps my greatest error was giving them benefit of the doubt when the truth whispered otherwise." "That's not on you," I said gently. "They fooled all of us. Still, I should have paid closer attention. I'm sorry, Morgan." Her apology, simple, heartfelt, sincere, was the one thing that cracked my composure. My eyes burned. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. "They've rented a small apartment," she said, her voice steady. "Much smaller than what they're used to. Thomas remains employed, but his position has been reduced. Catherine, she's working part-time at a department store. First job in over 20 years. The image of my brand-obsessed mother folding shirts for minimum wage felt surreal. Yet somehow, fitting. A lesson earned. "Are you helping them?" I asked, not judging, just wondering, only enough to prevent homelessness. "I paid 3 months' rent so they'd stay afloat. Beyond that? No. They need to face consequences and rebuild with what's left." I nodded, grateful. She wasn't enabling, but she wasn't cruel either. "And you?" she asked, touching my hand gently. "Are you ready to speak to them?" I paused. "Not yet. Maybe someday. but I'm still sorting through everything. You take the time you need, she said softly. Healing isn't a race. Months passed before I agreed to see them again. We met at a coffee shop downtown. A neutral zone. Familiar, but detached, they were already seated when I arrived, both looking older than I remembered. Mom had shed her manicured, polished veneer. Her hair was unstyled, her blouse department store quality, and her eyes lined with fatigue. Dad looked smaller, like life had worn him thin. His confident posture, once rigid, now drooped with defeat. Thank you for coming, Dad said as I sat down. We weren't sure you would. I almost didn't, I replied truthfully. But there are things I need to say. They nodded, bracing for the words. You didn't just damage me financially. I began, voice calm, controlled. You sabotaged my independence. You watched me struggle, really struggle, while you cashed checks that were meant to support me. That's not parenting. That's exploitation. Mom opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. I'm not finished. The worst part isn't even the money. It's the betrayal. The deceit. You were supposed to be the people I could count on above anyone else in the world. Instead, you lied, again and again. You manipulated me, played me against Grandma, made me feel ungrateful for questioning things that never added up. Their silence was suffocating, and when everything unraveled, instead of remorse, you blamed me. Accused me of favoritism. You weaponized your own guilt and tried to make it mine. I looked at them both, their eyes glossy with emotion, but I felt nothing, just truth, laid bare. I don't know what kind of relationship we'll have from here on out. That's not a decision I can make today. But if there's any chance of moving forward, it starts with you acknowledging every layer of what you did, not just with tears, but with change. Mom's lip trembled. Dad's head lowered. But I stood, collected my bag, and left the cafe without looking back. Some things needed to break to be rebuilt. And some relationships, no matter how deeply rooted, needed distance to heal. Tears slid silently down my mother's cheeks, but I didn't stop. I don't know who you are anymore, I said quietly. The people I thought raised me wouldn't have done this. Not to their children. Not to anyone. Dad's voice cracked. We made grave errors. Somewhere along the line, we lost who we were. Became versions of ourselves we never intended. We want to fix it, Mom added, urgency flooding her voice. We realize we can't repay the debt, at least not soon. But we're hoping to rebuild what we destroyed. We want a relationship with you again. I watched them carefully, measuring every flicker of emotion, every tremble in their expressions. There was sorrow, undoubtedly. But was it rooted in guilt over the wreckage they caused, or fear of facing life without the connections they betrayed? I need time, I replied evenly. And I need evidence. Real change, not just promises. You'll have to prove it, over months, not moments. That's the only way I can see any kind of future. It wasn't forgiveness. I wasn't there. Yet. But it was a sliver of space, a narrow opening for potential reconciliation, provided they chose to earn it. As I stepped out of the coffee shop into the brisk evening air, a strange lightness spread across my chest. I had said what needed to be said. Set clear boundaries. Reclaimed control of the story, for the first time in what felt like forever. I wasn't drowning, that night. I curled up by the window in my apartment, the city skyline glittering in the distance. My phone buzzed. A message from Ryan lit the screen. Proud of you for going. How are you holding up? I stared at the screen for a long second, then typed my reply, like I'm finally beginning my actual life, and in many ways, I was half a year. After that explosive dinner, I stood in my new design studio, taking in the sun-drenched space, clean surfaces, and top-of-the-line tools surrounding me. With Grandma's support and my own relentless effort, Morgan Walker Design hadn't just stabilized, it had soared. I now employed 2 full-time team members, operated out of a professional creative suite, and had landed several prestigious contracts. My days were packed, but not chaotic. The pressure I once lived under had been replaced with purpose. With rhythm, Sunday brunches with Grandma had become a sacred tradition. Weekly dinners with Ryan and Caitlin cemented our sibling solidarity. My planner was filled with pitch meetings, artistic workshops, and, more recently, a few cautious dates. All the pieces of adult life that had once been overshadowed by survival were finally falling into place. As for my parents, our relationship remained distant. We had initiated limited interactions, a birthday greeting, a polite holiday call, a single dinner at a quiet restaurant. Carefully curated moments that didn't stir up too much. To their credit, they were making an effort. Mom had joined a financial accountability group. Dad was meeting with a licensed counselor. They were living frugally in a small rental unit, working humble jobs just to cover bills. It was a complete reversal from their former lifestyle. The contrast was jarring, and yet, necessary. It's strange, I told Grandma one Sunday, stirring cream into my coffee. A part of me still loves them. They're my parents. But I don't trust them anymore. And I don't know if I ever will. Grandma nodded knowingly. Trust, she said, is harder to mend than any financial damage. It has to be rebuilt slowly, through truth-telling and consistency. And they're only just beginning that journey. Do you think they can really change? I asked, not expecting a definite answer. She considered carefully. People only evolve when the pain of staying the same outweighs the fear of becoming different. Your parents have certainly tasted that pain. Whether it leads to transformation, only time will tell. Since everything had unraveled, Grandma had implemented a new system for managing the family's legacy. Every financial gift was now direct, documented, and carefully regulated. No more go-betweens. No more misplaced trust. I should have done this years ago, she admitted one afternoon. But I believed Catherine and Thomas would act with integrity. That was my error. With that long overdue structure in place, I had been free to thrive. Free from the constant pressure of scarcity. Free to build without sabotage lurking beneath the surface. The anxiety that had once shadowed every bill, every decision, had finally faded. Confidence had taken its place. Ryan had undergone a similar rebirth. Leaving the corporate world behind, he discovered he loved helping entrepreneurs strategize and build from the ground up. His consulting firm was modest but growing. And for the first time in years, there was genuine happiness in his voice when he talked about work. For so long, our family had operated in smoke and mirrors. Now, piece by piece, we were building something real, and this time, it was ours. I never knew work could actually feel this fulfilling, Ryan said, lifting his glass as we sat across from each other at a cozy downtown bar. I wake up excited for Monday mornings. Can you believe that? Mondays. I laughed, not at him, but in genuine delight. Watching him rediscover purpose had been one of the more beautiful surprises in the aftermath of everything, but if anyone had undergone the most profound transformation, it was Caitlin. Once quiet, overly accommodating, and always craving approval, she had grown into her power. She stopped appeasing our parents, especially when they attempted their old guilt tactics. She was thriving in graduate school. She even started seeing someone wildly outside our mom's acceptable mold, a thoughtful, kind-hearted tattoo artist with inked sleeves and an easy laugh. I spent my whole life trying to be their perfect daughter, she told us one evening during sibling dinner. What a colossal waste of energy. As for Grandma, she hadn't just weathered the storm, she'd become a force of renewal. At 79, she completely overhauled how our family handled wealth. Transparent trusts. Clearly written agreements. Direct financial lines with each of us. No filters. No ambiguity. The silence around money ends with me, she declared boldly. Financial awareness is a legacy I should have passed on long ago. 12 months after the night that detonated our old family dynamic, the four of us, Grandma, Ryan, Caitlin, and me, gathered at her house for what we decided would become an annual tradition, our family summit. Our parents weren't invited. I've been thinking a lot about legacy, Grandma said as we settled into the sunroom, its glass walls glowing with late afternoon light. Not just wealth, but principles. What values do we want this family to stand for moving forward? Over several hours, we engaged in raw, honest conversation about past wounds and future goals, about money, boundaries, respect, communication. We laid the foundation for a new family blueprint, one built on truth, clarity, and trust. No more secrets. No more blurred lines. As we finished our meal, Grandma raised her glass. To the Walker family, reimagined, rebuilt, and stronger than ever. I raised mine too, a quiet wave of pride washing through me. In just a year, I had gone from feeling betrayed and shattered to standing in full ownership of my life. Yes, the funds returned to me mattered. But what had truly changed? My life was something deeper, self-respect. I had learned to protect my peace, to demand honesty, and to remove myself from dynamics that hurt, even if those connections were bound by blood. I had also learned what true family looks like. Not the curated image our parents had projected for years, but the steady, compassionate presence of someone like Grandma. The unshakable bond my siblings and I had cultivated, one built not on performance, but on shared truth. 2 years after that fateful dinner, I sat at my design studio reviewing concepts for a marquee client. The space buzzed with creative energy, my team laughing down the hall, fresh espresso brewing, light pouring in through oversized windows. My phone buzzed. A message from Mom, thinking of you today. I hope your presentation goes well. Love, Mom. A small gesture. No pressure. No guilt. Just acknowledgement and encouragement. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then typed back, thanks. I'll let you know how it turns out. It wasn't warm. It wasn't gushing. But it was real. And that was all I had to give. To their credit, they had learned not to expect more than I was ready to offer. That night, as my team and I celebrated the successful pitch over dinner, I looked around the table and quietly reflected on how far things had come. How far I had come. The road hadn't been smooth. It had been carved with tears, decisions I never wanted to make, and truths I never wanted to face. But the life I stood in now, one rooted in purpose, filled with integrity, surrounded by people I trusted, was worth every painful step. The money they'd taken had been returned. But the greater restoration had happened within. I had discovered a kind of inner fortitude I didn't know existed. A resilience forged in heartbreak. A new sense of direction built not on old expectations, but on my own vision. Later that evening, I dialed Grandma. My presentation went great, I told her. They signed the contract. I'm so proud of you, Morgan, she said warmly. Not just for your accomplishments, but for the woman you've become. I learned from the best, I said, and meant it. After we hung up, I walked to my window. The city skyline stretched before me, glowing with possibility. The woman who had uncovered her parents' betrayal 2 years ago felt like a shadow of who I was now, naive, burdened, defined by scarcity and familial pressure. The woman staring out at the nightscape now stood tall, financially grounded, emotionally steady, and surrounded by love that was real. That betrayal could have crushed me. Instead, it became my turning point, and strangely enough, I wouldn't trade that journey for anything. Have you ever discovered a betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did it change you? What did it teach you? Share your story in the comments, and if this one resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and pass it along to someone who might need to hear that even the deepest wounds can lead to renewal. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes losing everything you thought you needed is the first step toward becoming exactly who you're meant to be.